Good morning, it's 7:30 a.m. on Tuesday the 26th of March, and this is the 48th of 53 consecutive 5-mile walks from the Gresford Disaster Memorial to the Miners' Rescue and back again. With introductions to Alan and Margaret Jones-Maid, I was keen to tap into their expertise on the underground conditions at Gresford and other elements of the actual disaster. A series of fascinating insights emerged in relation to cost-cutting owners, heat and humidity, ventilation, and the possible cause of the disaster.
It must have been absolutely horrendous. People were working from early hours until it was dark. They didn't see daylight for 6 days a week. It must have been absolutely horrendous. Even when I was working, the conditions, the heat and the humidity could be dreadful at Gresford. They really could. And Gresford was a very gassy pit, very gassy. It was no life, it could not have been a life. A big problem at the time prior to the explosion, when the shafts were sunk, there was new legislation that come out to say that every pit had to have 2 roadways, one taking air in round the face and one out. But that legislation didn't come until 1911 and it didn't apply retrospectively. So the owners worked hell for leather to get the pit shafts sunk and the pit operational prior to 1911. So at the time of the explosion, the air was going round, different faces, picking up dust, picking up gas. In the 14s area, it must have been, again, horrible. The lads there were wearing clogs, but the holes have been drilled in them to let the sweat out. They were wearing underpants, that's it. There was no safety helmets, anything like that. But just to be working in them conditions. But this is in the 1930s. So it wasn't as though it was the 18th century or whatever. They were working in very, very bad conditions then. Personally, I've got what I think happened. If we look at the time of the explosion, just after 2 o'clock in the morning, that's the only time them guys would have had not to relax, to eat, drink of water and something to eat. Now, they would be taken off the face, or they would go off the face to do that. Now, the face, the coal, had to be brought down. Explosives were used to bring the coal down. So they would not bring men off the face at any other time to do it. They wanted them working. So the ideal time was between 2 o'clock and 2:20, so that they could get in and fire the explosives. To me, it seems a coincidence that's when the explosion occurred. It would just take one spark from the detonators, whatever, and the place, well, it would have gone up. The shot firing, if you test with the lamp and it's clear, even if you did get sparks, it's fine. I've seen gas burning underground. I've seen not an explosion, but I've seen gas burning, and it's a frightening thing. But if it doesn't start burning the coal dust, it just gone. The men, they would keep the place going as much as everybody was out to get the coal out to get the wages. See, at that time, 25% of the country unemployed. You didn't argue with your bosses, you did as you were told.
Yeah, 40% in Wrexham at the time.
Was it 40?
In Wrexham,
wow.
Nationally,
it was 25. I didn't realise that.
40 in Wrexham.
But I remember that
yeah,
one.
40%.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I think from what I've read, I agree with Alan. I think ventilation was a big problem because, as Alan said, because there weren't 2 intakes, you know.
What intake am I about? Yeah.
the same gas as it was going there, it would go all the way round the pit, wouldn't it? You know, picking up particles or whatever as it went round. So the further round the pit you were, the harder it would be to breathe. The 4 points are actually, there's one just off from the flash, there's one close to the Pantropain, and then there are 2 a little bit further out, aren't they?
Oh, what, the points that
The
they
points that
could,
they
they
thought,
could have been,
yeah.
You've been there to the pants,
I
yeah.
have, yeah.
When you're looking out to the back over the top, what a garden of remembrance.
At this point of the walk, I'm taking a slight detour, and instead of turning left down New Road towards town, I've turned right to Roast Robin, and I'm making my way to Roasty Industrial Estate before returning to the route again. My destination is a red brick building that stands alongside the A483 between the Sainsbury's and Gresford roundabouts. The vast majority of locals and visitors will have seen this building, but many, including me up until a few hours ago, will not be aware of its significance. Yesterday, Alan mentioned that he grew up in one of the 50 or so terraced homes that made up the Roasty Colliery houses. This industrial park is where they once stood, just a short walk from the Wrexham Acton Colliery and 1 mile north of the Wrexham town centre. The colliery was sunk in 1868 to a depth of 320 metres, half as deep as Gresford, and it operated for a relatively short amount of time, closing in 1924. At its peak in 1915, 590 men were employed here. The closure here solved the problem of manpower shortages at nearby Gresford, which was owned by the same company. The disaster would happen 9 years later, and it makes you wonder if any of the relocated miners died in what would be another of life's fateful twists. The Wrexham Acton Colliery is the perfect example of the forgotten miner. For whilst no newsworthy disaster took place here, 49 men died at the site between 1870 and 1918 in separate mining accidents. That's 18% of the Gresford death toll in just one Wrexham mine. The incredible Durham Mining Museum website lists all the men who died at Wrexham and Acton Colliery and their causes of death. Scrolling down the list provides a macabre insight into how miners died. Fell out of cage, hit by prop, explosion of gas, roof fall, stone fell upon him, a bar fell upon him, fell into sump, crushed between cage and landing plates, boiler explosion. There were seemingly many ways to die as a miner. The youngest victim was 14-year-old Robert Jones, born in 1867 and dead by 1881. He was known as a screen boy, and his job was to separate small pieces of coal from larger ones. The report into his death describes how the deceased was struck on the head by a rock thrown by a fellow miner who was not aware he was there. This red brick building here, now operated by Wrexham Pallets, was the Wrexham Acton Colliery's winding engine house. It's from here where the winding engine lowered colliers into the mine shaft and winched mined coal up to the surface. A historic building that only the local historian will be aware of in terms of its significance. Mining was a dreadfully dangerous occupation that killed many local men and boys, but it was also the force that built this town, and without it, who knows where we would be today. I was reminded of this by Margaret yesterday. For all the pain, for all the death that we must never forget, the industry also gave life to this town.
Today's walk was dedicated to Stanley Stratford, John Tarrant, William H. Taylor, Berwyn Thomas, Ernest T. Thomas and John E. Thomas.